who is a Sonoma State WGS Women's and Gender Studies major, queer studies minor alumni. I am thrilled to have with us Bianca Zamora, who graduated in 2015, and we knew at the time she was going places. She's such a dynamic and amazing person. So I'm just going to read the bio here for her. She's a proud queer Latina feminist educator, and she's going to enact her performance ethnography that draws from Gloria Anzaldúa's Borderlands off Montana, which you haven't read it. It's amazing. To explore the relationship between colonialism, racism, sexism, and phobia. She's the coordinator of CSU Montgomery Bay's Otter Cross-Cultural Center, which is like the hub, right?
Yes.
Where she utilizes intersectional and arts-based approaches to explore issues of power, identities, and coalition building. Outside of her work, she's engaged in community advocacy through poetry. Most recently, she spoke at the 2019 Monterey Peninsula Pride, and also at the 2020 Women's March. She holds a master's degree in student affairs from Miami University. Welcome back to campus.
So thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Bianca Zamora. I use she and her pronouns, and a very, very proud alumni of Sonoma State's Women and Gender Studies program. I'm so grateful to be here with all of you to talk about bi-brown brilliance and reclaiming our stories in the Borderlands. Just 5 years ago, 2015, when I graduated, I wasn't out, and to be able to come back and speak about identity, that's really powerful. Because I remember actually the first time that I ever saw a queer Latina speak was actually where y'all are sitting in the queer lecture series, and that was like, woo, that was powerful. So to be able to be here with you all is such a gift, so thank you. I did want to mention that in today's talk, I did want to provide a content warning, as I do incorporate adult language, adult situations. I do talk about anti-queerness, biphobia, racism, and that may invoke some emotions, right? Because the ways that I'm going to be sharing my journey, you also have different journeys and experiences. So if at any time you need to step out, please do so. Sound good? All right, gorgeous. So I graduated from Sonoma State, and then I went to Miami University, and that was the first time that I was like, I'm going to go ahead and write about myself, because I moved to Ohio, during prime election season. So this was like 2015. On every single house was like a Trump sign, and the first time I ever was called a beaner, so it's a derogatory word for brown communities, particularly Mexican communities. That's when it was like my first week when I moved to Ohio. So I had to realize, like, in order to process and to survive for 2 years, I had to do a lot of writing. And so that's what I'm going to be sharing with you all today, is some of the studies that I did through critical ethnography. I'm also a poet, and so that's what I'll be doing, is sharing some poetry, some theory, and yes, I love a poet, yes, honey. So to share some arts, because I really feel that through arts we come to see very often what we feel, and it helps connect people. So what is critical autoethnography? Critical autoethnography promotes the analysis of oneself in relation to culture, and is not about focusing on just the self, but studies the self. You study yourself, right, to understand larger societal systems of oppression. So I'm going to be, studying myself to understand how colonialism works, how biphobia works, how sexism works, how racism works, to highlight these larger systems that are happening to not just myself, but other bi-brown communities. So, woo, little dating history of Bianca Zamora. I never dated. My first date actually happened when I was 22 years old, and I moved to Ohio. So So we're going to explore some of my OkCupid dating profile messages. Whew. So that was a way that I was able to see how systems of oppression were at play through some of those messages. We're going to explore some of my personal writings and also some photography to talk about bi, brown brilliance. And I don't know if you all know, but on your right is the bisexual flag. And just to give you some knowledge if you didn't know that. So what is bisexuality? Bisexuality, so a bisexual person has the capacity for romantic and or sexual attraction to more than just one gender. Bisexuality does not mean the gender binary. We're going to talk about what that means. And bisexuality is an umbrella term for non-monosexuality. So monosexuality is defined as being attracted to people of no more than one gender. So often when people talk about being bi, right, they often say, oh, you're attracted to men and women, right? That's usually like the thought is, you're attracted to men and women. Really, what we're talking about is gender. So it's not always, men and women. It can, for some people, be, bisexuality can be men and women, but for other folks, it can be, various different genders, right? It could be someone who is, who is attracted to women, but also trans communities, right? It's not really this binary that everyone always thinks it can be, but not always that way. So the umbrella term for non-monosexuality, so if you are attracted to one gender, you are monosexual. And this is not that. That is adding different gender identities to your sexuality. So, you know what, let's go back. So when you've heard about, the stories of bisexual communities, what do you hear, what is like the stereotypes or the myths about bisexual people and communities? Yeah.
A lot of bisexual people are like promiscuous.
Ooh, yeah, so we're promiscuous. Okay, yeah, so we're promiscuous. What else? What else have you heard about bi communities? Yeah.
That it's just like the transition from being fully to one side instead of like liking both.
Yeah, so you can't like both. You're really just, sliding into, to being queer, right? You can't really like both men and women or different genders, right? Yeah, what else? I saw some hands. Yes.
It's like 50-50, you choose either you like men or you like
So, right, it's 50-50. I can choose one or the other. It's, and both are equally attracted to me, or I'm attracted to them. Yes. Yes. So if you find a partner, right, that is of that gender identity, like that's what you are. You're no longer bi, right? What else? Anything else? Other identities, other stereotypes or myths. Back there, yes. It's trendy. Yes, it's trendy. Oh, it's an in thing. You're just being part of the trend, honey. Yeah. What else? Anything else? Any other last myths? Yes. How many of us have heard that one? Ooh, you're just confused. Yeah, you're just experimenting. Okay. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
like being unaccepted by like some homosexual communities.
So right. So when you are bisexual, you're under the queer umbrella, right? But a lot of times, bi communities, they're like they experience narratives of oppression and exclusion even within the queer community, because queer communities can say, well, you're not really fully queer. You're not, because you can choose. So you have the option to choose. So you're not fully queer. Exactly. So, yeah, so some of these myths. So that we're afraid of commitment, that we're really gay/lesbian, or we're heterosexual. So we're told we have to pick a side. We're too sexual, we're greedy, we're unfaithful, so we might cheat, right? We're performing for attention, we're attention seekers, or we're confused, or it's just a phase. You'll get over it, it's just a phase. Or that we're liars or can't be trusted, or that we don't exist. So these are stories that are told about our communities, and I want to make things very, very clear. If, for people to, like, for example, too sexual, it's okay, like, it's powerful to claim your sexuality. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is when it's a problem when that becomes your only story, right? That's the problem. Like, I'm afraid of commitment, hey. I am. It freaks me out. Hence 22, so my first date, So, but when that becomes the sole narrative of bi communities, that's a problem. And so we're going to start to unravel and create our own stories through Borderlands theory. So Borderlands, the first time I ever knew it was a possibility to be a queer Latina was when I was 19 years old. And I took my Women and Gender Studies class, and I read Borderlands, La Frontera. She is a lesbian Chicana feminista, and reading this work changed my trajectory. And I talk about, I didn't know it was a possibility to exist because in my, growing up, we had like one queer uncle, and there was always like whispers in the wind of like joto, right? These derogatory slurs, and so there was like this one uncle who kind of left, right? He left, and so for me, like, queerness was not even a possibility for women in my mind. And so reading this work changed that trajectory for me. So borders are set up to define the places that are safe and unsafe to distinguish us from them. The borderlands are present whenever two or more cultures edge each other. It's a place of contradictions. So there's this term, ni de aquí ni de allá. Has anyone ever heard that phrase, ni de aquí ni de allá? What does that mean for folks? Yes?
Neither here nor there.
Exactly. I'm from neither here nor there. And so she talks about living in a world that, in a world where whiteness is so much the norm, but as a brown woman, she is not the norm. And these two cultures, and trying to be, because she's not Mexican enough for Mexican communities, she's not white enough for white communities, so she's in these constant contradictions. Same thing with being queer, right? You're in constant contradiction, so these cultures are clashing. So being bisexual, right, for a lot of communities feels that way, because I'm never queer enough, and I'm never hetero or enough in this world that tells me I have to choose, right? So the prohibited and forbidden are its inhabitants. The squint-eyed, the perverse, the queer, the troublesome, the mongrel, the mulatto, the half-breed, the half-dead, in short, those who cross over, pass over, or go through the confines of normal. So when we think about borderlands, the center is whose voices are often centered. It's those in power, right? Those who hold identities that are privileged identities. And so when you're someone who is othered, who holds marginalized identities, who may be queer or a person of color or low income, right? Your identities get pushed to the sides. We call this sides, the edges, the margins. So when your identities are in the margins, you often have a power to make your own path. It can be scary because often these paths are not written. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, that there is power and brilliance in the margins. So acts of erasure. Colonialism. Colonialism are violent processes where settlers assert power and claim over indigenous communities, acquisition of lands, bodies, voices, and enforce gender and racial superiority. Physical and psychological violence perpetuated by primarily European settlers against women in Las Americas. Mestiza daughters were sexualized, racialized, and demonized. So in processes of coloniality and colonization, we see how lands are taken, but we also see how power is forced onto people's bodies, voices, and stories. And colonization happened in the past and is happening currently. And we're going to show examples of how colonization happens in everyday situations, even in dating websites, in the ways that sexism, racism, and homophobia and biphobia are happening constantly. So biphobia is prejudice, discrimination, and fear targeted towards a bisexual community. So when people say things like, "Oh, y'all are picky," or y'all are slutty, that is an act of biphobia. When people say y'all don't really exist, you're just being greedy, that's an act of biphobia. By erasure, right, the erasure, exclusion, and negation of bisexuality as a legitimate sexual orientation, identity, and community. So by erasure can happen in the queer community by other queer members, right? So saying when those bisexual identities are not empowered, included, and supported. Okay, so before we move on, I'm big on affirmations. One way that I was able to process through a lot of my experiences was through claiming affirmations, claiming brilliance. So I want to read a quick piece to Buy Brown Loves. 1. You are not a phase. You are not confused or a mistake or the perverse. You are real, legitimate, a beautiful light of love and brilliance too. You do not need to find the right man to fix you. You are creation at its finest. 3, darling, your love is revolution. It scares people that something so powerful, so loud, so magical, so beautifully queer won't be controlled. You won't let them. We won't let them. 4, no one has the right to ask violating questions about sex ever. 4, no one has the right to ask violating questions about sex ever. 5, loving you is a revolution. 6, loving her, loving him, loving them brings the edges of rock and soil back together again to form the lands we have been forced from. All right, so now, thank you. We're going to move on to talking about the embodiment of shame and how shame works in very powerful ways, and the ways that it's etched a lot of times on our bodies, right? And it flows through our spirits, and to have to like regurgitate that and to heal from that takes time and processes. There's one of my favorite quotes by Cohen Cruz who says, "We internalize oppression and are left with cops in our heads, right, and cops in the streets." And so when I talk about cops in the streets, yes, the literal police officers, right, who may condone violence, but also the cops that happen outside of that, cops that can come in the forms of our families, of our friendship groups, of our maybe religious institutions, of our education system, politics, and media. So all of these voices, right, are telling us what voices and what bodies and what stories can be seen as powerful and what cannot be seen as powerful. So I will read a piece and then talk a little bit about this. This one's called What Happened to La Niña Buena? A poem on finding agency and self-love in graduate school. Ya no soy niña buena. I'm not a good girl no more. I speak in a way that frightens mommy, that makes her question who the hell took over my body. I speak about sex, power, change, feministas, radical liberation, brown bisexual brilliance, cosas, things que no se dicen at the table. I scream maldiciones. Fuck that racist shit, that homophobic shit, that patriarchal shit, that police brutality shit. Se pone triste. She gets sad because I don't go to church no more, because I am a bisexual brown Chicana, a body of detestable Borderlands, my uncles mutter. Faggot. Mommy is silent. Everyone is silent, but my body still exists. ¿Por qué hablas así, niña? Why you talk that way, girl? Aren't you proud of me, Mommy? I'm in a book. I am alive. Mommy sees me a total of 30 days in 1 year. Mommy holds me like she used to, but our bodies do not feel like a familiar home anymore. She tries to fix the parts of me she thinks are broken. I tell her she can't. Ya no soy niña buena. I'm not a good girl no more. So we're afraid of being abandoned by the mother, the culture, la raza, for being unacceptable, faulty, damaged. Most of us unconsciously believe that if we reveal this unacceptable aspect of the self, our mother, culture, race will totally reject us. To avoid rejection, some of us conform to the values of the culture, push the unacceptable parts into the shadows. Woman does not feel safe when her own culture and white culture are critical of her, when males of all races hunt her as prey. And so for me, growing up, shame was a very big thing around sexuality. It wasn't, I remember the first person I ever told that I was queer to was Dr. Lena McQuaid, who's a WGS professor. And I remember for like 3 days, I was like going to her class, to her office hours, like hot Cheetos. By the way, hot Cheetos are her favorite snack. So I would like bring her hot Cheetos for like 3 days, and I was like, I must look super creepy, like just bringing her hot Cheetos. But finally, like on the third day, I was like, Kalina, I just need to tell you something. I just need to say it. And she was really powerful. She is actually the one who told me to read Borderlands, and she also told me to go watch this clip of a movie called Mosquita y Mari. So it was these two queer brown Chicanas and their love story. And I remember it was like a 30-second video, and I went home that night and I cried for like hours and just kept replaying that 30-minute video or that 30-second like trailer. But it was the first time where I didn't feel shame, where I could just like release that shame. Politics of respectability. Okay, this is baby queer Bianca, probably going to church and was probably checking out another cute queer girl and has to go to confession now. But politics of respectability. So to be respectable, to be seen as a good Latina, it was like you could never be queer, right? You were raised to marry a man. And that was like the only story. That was like the one path, right? And so Anzaldúa says, for lesbians of color, the ultimate rebellion she can make against her native culture is through her sexual behavior. She goes against two moral prohibitions, sexuality and homosexuality, being lesbian and raised Catholic, indoctrinated as straight. So here are the two pieces, and we'll talk about them in a moment. This is my first kiss. My first kiss was at the age of 6, not 22, like I tell the story, not to a man in graduate school, not to a man I met online, not to a man drenched in cologne and regret, not to a man. She had soft hair and a sweet smile. We played house, lived in a mansion, transformed gender roles. She was my wife. I would cook her favorite meals, and she would kiss me goodnight every night until that night she cried, lesbian. No kiss. Just pause. Just shame, disgust. I'm not a lesbian, she tells me. I'm not sucia, not dirty. I like boys. I cannot love you. So I packed it all away. My love and her memory and the mansion and the kisses and the hope and the secret. I buried it so deep in the ground, I was convinced death couldn't resurface. I drank shame like water. Stuffed myself with lies until I could no longer eat. At the age of 6 and 7 and 12 and 16 and 17 and 21, I forgot what it was to exist in a mansion. My first kiss was at the age of 6, not 22, like I tell the story. Not to a man in graduate school, not to a man I met online, not to a man drenched in cologne and regret, not to a man. I know mommy's disappointment, the way that I memorized Chavela Vargas lyrics, both sing songs of sorrow, of heartache, of regret. What do I say when mommy repeats for the 1000th time that I will find a man, that she knows the right one will come, that I should be patient, that I shouldn't settle, that I should be less public? Her sighs speak for her now. She says, how could I love a cosa tan fea, tan dirty, tan tainted, tan hairy down there? She doesn't know I tried. Screamed at God until it happened. God whispered that she too was a mujer. God too loved women, craved women. She told me men robbed her of her story because they couldn't fathom that much power and love wouldn't include them. Okay. So for myself, grad school was a time when I really had the opportunity to do a lot of writing and a lot of healing. So Gloria Anzaldúa wrote Borderlands in Vermont, and she said something. She was like, the snow was white, the people were white, everything was white. And I've never felt more brown, she said. And I think for myself, it was also true. There, the intense toxicity, the intense energy, and we'll talk about violence in a moment, was so incredibly heavy that I had to look inwardly, and it was honestly the best opportunity to heal was through writing and talking about the borderlands. So colonization and erasure. So biphobia, sexism, and colonization and erasure, enact erasure. So all of these are working together at the same time to claim power over bisexual brown people of color. So the term exotification, so exotification of brown bisexual bodies as violence. I experienced a lot of exotification, meaning that as a Latina, and as a queer Latina, there's certain stories that are posed on my body because of my identities. So these are some of the examples that were from my OkCupid messages. Finger your asshole wetback. Interested in having your historically marginalized sex life empowered by a young, privileged white man. So you totally look like a Latina porn star I've been watching. I was wondering what I need to do to become your next co-star. So at this time in my life, I identified as bisexual, attracted to someone to men and women. It has shifted for me now to include different gender identities, but living in Ohio, the queer scene is not that cute and poppin', let me tell you. It's not. So I was constantly getting messages that were like this, and I don't know, back in the day, OkCupid has changed now. It's more like a swipe left, swipe right kind of deal, but back then, you can really build your profile to tell your story. And so I talked about how, I was really invested in social justice, wanted to, my career goals, working with marginalized student populations. And so they took what I said, right, or even what I didn't say, and reacted in a certain way without my consent, right? That is colonization, when people put violence, put violence on your bodies, on your stories. And some of these people were even were teachers, right? Going on their these were teachers, and we'll see another one in a moment. So I was experiencing all of this energy, and so what on OkCupid back in the day, it said contact me if, and then you could be if you going on cute dates or whatever. For me, I added one at the bottom that said do not contact me if. And I did this out of an act of self-preservation. And also, I didn't really want to get messages anymore from certain people. So I said, please do not contact me if you are, and this may, this was Bianca a couple years ago, but please do not contact me if you are a white man. And I did, and I said that, and I needed to say that in that time in my life. And so after I said that, it got even more intense. I got a whole other wave because they don't like it. So this was actually, he was a teacher, second grade teacher. He had wrote on his profile, and he just messaged me this out of nowhere. Why are you so jealous of the white race? Why not focus on making your race less shitty rather than hating on the more successful ones? Brown-skinned people are free to be as bigoted as they please. You delude yourself into thinking the Americas were hippie before whites arrived, completely ignoring the heads rolling off Aztec pyramids or the scalps hanging from Indians' belts. Thank God whites were more civilized and able to spread some of that civility that you refer to as oppression. It is an undeniable fact that whites were the more civilized race during the colonial period. That's how they conquered so many groups. I know. So when we talk about colonialism happens every single place, even on our dating websites, right? When someone chooses to make an act of resistance, and I want to make it very clear that I'm not talking about individual people. I'm talking about a collective system of oppression. So there's differences, right? People enact systems of oppression. They enact these ideologies because they're allowed. We brew them. So it's up to us to address those in the ways that best work for us. How are we doing on time? Gorgeous. Okay, we're already here at 55.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I was experiencing these different things, and I thought it was a powerful act to claim brilliance in a place where I was told to not claim brilliance, right? So Anzaldúa writes these powerful, powerful words as an act of resistance. And so that's what I began to do. I'm going to share 3 last pieces. And then open it up for discussion. Sound good? This is called Queer Home. This was after a breakup, so we're going to go through some processes. You are home. Your body, your voice, your curves, your hair is home. Those who enter are visitors. No te olvides. It is an invitation, not a destination, not a site of colonization. Your queerness is your casa azul, with queer goddesses celebrating you with amor, softness, and cariño. No unwanted diegos or disdain or discomfort. Your body is a strong space, a brilliant building. Its walls are fit to perfection. The colors bright and bold and lined with gold. Pájaros indigenous to your motherland live here. The ancestors smile when they see how beautifully you have decorated. My aunties, mami, queer lovers, homegirls from the academy, vecinas and niñas on the dance floor frequent my casita. It's a place of joy, warmth, healing, unstoppable laughs, creative smiles, delicious vino and cumbia mixes. Some may try to make your walls to their liking, hammer nails and pins, decorate it with their muebles and paintings. Resist. There is no for sale sign posted here, no tenants to house except you. Reclaim, redecorate, and remember. You are home. Your curves, your hair, your body is home. Those who enter are visitors. No te olvides to return a tu casa. And now, the next one's the first love poem I've ever written, so just shy of Valentine's a couple weeks ago. La Luna told me a secret, that she would send me a gift, a gem to hold, told me I would find a love so grand that doubt and fear and shame would wash clean from my body, would know what it was to exist as magic, know what it was to fly, to sing among the stars, to be made a river, and open streams I never knew existed. La Luna told me a secret, that I would know what it was to be wrapped in treasure, to release, to breathe, to glow in my sun, to live in the present, to feel my heart sing new rhythms, to fall in love, to sleep with gold in my arms, to know a love as deep as hers. So I'm gonna talk about this, and then we're gonna finish with the last poem. So when we think about, she talks about the borderlands. In the borderlands, where I talked about those who are pushed to the margins, in the margins, there's magic. Because the new mestiza copes by developing a tolerance for contradictions, a tolerance for ambiguity. She learns to be an Indian and Mexican culture, to be Mexican from an Anglo point of view. She learns to juggle cultures. So bi brown brilliance means juggling multiple cultures, and that is magic. Like, you are literally creating magic by claiming your identities in a space that tells you not to. So I'm gonna finish with this piece, Brilliance in the Borderlands. For las otras who are the moon, the stars, the sun, writing as an act of resistance. I am brilliant. I will say that shit again. I am fucking brilliant. I am the moon, the stars, the sun, a bold combination of chingona fire, mujer warrior, a brown goddess. I had to learn it was beautiful to repeat this out loud because the white man taught abuela, who taught mommy, who taught me that calladita se ve más bonita. That my silence is a virtue, that I should be more like La Virgen Maria, a silent martyr whose body and labor are best when unacknowledged. That my brilliance is to be ashamed of, to be kept a secret among the shadows, that to make myself smaller is to be a good woman, the right kind of woman, the colonized woman. Pero ya me cansé with discourses that tell me that to be humbled and oppressed is to be humble. I scream for myself, for hermanas, for madres and abuelas, and daughters and aunties and vecinas who are taught that they should not have the audacity to claim the air. I break free of colonizing shackles. I work to free other hermanas. I throw my hands up and slice bullshit ideologies that work to dismiss me, police me, control me. I fight for mujeres who have been othered, for bi, brown, brilliant loves. I write for las otras who are the moon, the stars, the sun, reminding them that our magic is not a secret to be kept in darkness, reminding them that we are fucking brilliant. Thank you so much. All right, so I'm a big believer in like dialogue. And so any dialogue, any questions that you might have, like this is collective knowledge too. Like if you have something to say too, like you're like, I want to share my experience, please do so. So we have 10 minutes for any questions or comments, yeah.
How long did you last?
2 years. Yes, the question was, how long did I last in Ohio? I lasted 2 years because my program was 2 years and I got fully funded. Y'all should go to grad school. If you have questions about grad school, come talk to me after because you can get paid to go to school. I didn't know that was a thing. But 2 years, I believe you can. I lasted 2 years and I told myself, it's only 2 years. And it was honestly the best opportunities for me going there. Yeah. Comments, questions, concerns, dialogue, yes. What got me into poetry? So actually, the Hub was actually the first time I started writing poetry. Yes, Hub. Yes, I love it. So the Hub started this women-identified poetry group, and we were mentored by an amazing woman named Christina. And so it was through there that I started to talk about my identities, but it wasn't. And to do poetry, and it was so cool to do writing with other badass women. But I really didn't start actually engaging in intentional by myself writing until I went to grad school. Yes.
What gave you courage to go to your professor and go talk to her?
What gave me courage to go to my professor and go talk to my professor? Well, for me, Lena and also another amazing woman who used to go here by the name of Julie Greathouse, were the only queer women I knew. And they were both white, but I just knew, like, I just needed to talk to somebody, you know, because mental health was a big thing. So I was a student leader on campus, and I would always tell people, let's go to the counseling center, let's go to the counseling center, let's go to the counseling center. Meanwhile, I did not go to the counseling center, and I needed to. And so that I remember that week, I felt like I always envisioned like a trash can. And I felt like all of my stresses and my emotions would just pile in that trash can, and the trash can was seeping out. I was like, and so because I was seeping out, I couldn't feel no more damn trash. I had to go talk to somebody, and Lena was someone who I trusted, you know, and I had to. And so I'm really grateful for those like institutional support people, you know, to just have like given me, you know, a resource, you know, yeah.
So first of all, I have to say, you're such a baddie.
Thank you, thank you.
And now that you are in this place where you fully know who you are, what advice would you give your little self?
Oh, baby queer Bianca. So the question is, what advice would I give my younger self? I would say, don't be afraid to love yourself. I think I was very afraid to love myself and to look in the mirror. And that hurt. That was hard. And I remember when I left here. So I'm gonna be hella vulnerable right now. But when I left here, I did a lot of big things. I was like often like the go-to person for social justice on campus. Like I was just kind of had my hands in everywhere, you know. And so I often advocated for people, but I was always afraid to advocate for like myself. And that was something that when I left, I just had to like face and do. And I'm always I'm always becoming. We are always becoming into ourselves even more. So I think even now, telling myself like, you know, the same kind of advice too I'm taking right now is like, don't be afraid to look in the mirror, you gorgeous baddie, right? So same thing for everybody. Don't be afraid to look in the mirror, honey. Anybody else? Yes, back here.
I appreciate sharing your words, your perspective, and you had mentioned briefly like that your identity and sexuality has changed, and I want to share what that looks like.
For sure.
How that occurred.
Yeah. So I still do identify as bisexual. But I used to be attracted to men and women. And I felt like it just didn't happen overnight where I shifted. I felt like it was like sand, you know, like where it washes away and it creates like forms new kind of sand and waves. And so now I identify as bisexual, but someone who's attracted to non-binary folks as well as women. And so that has shifted for me. And it just, like I said, like I don't have like a moment, but it was kind of like sand and water, you know, in the past couple of years. Yeah. 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 So the question was, I write about my family a lot. Like, are we close? Yes, we are close, and my family's awesome. They have, you know. There was a Julie Greathouse, who I mentioned earlier, told me something when I came out to her when I graduated, or when I talked to her about my identities. She said, you have had a couple of moments to like process your identities, you know? Your family, this is new to them. So they're gonna have their time to process what you're saying too. So that helped me be more graceful. And you know, it was a little bit rocky at first with some of my family members, but like my grandpa, who only speaks Spanish, I remember I was like, how do I even fucking say, like, you know, like, how do I talk about this? And so I told him, I was like, soy bisexual, like, and he was the bomb. He had the best reaction. He was like, pues ni modo, like, oh well, all right, so it's good. And like, you know, and that was really heartwarming because everyone was like, you need to tell your grandpa, you need to tell your grandpa, you need to tell your grandpa, he's old school. And I was like, no, y'all are fucking old school, my grandpa's with it, you know, so sometimes, you know, the people who we may expect to not be there, like, really do come through and surprise us. And then my auntie, we went to New Orleans, and like she, you know, I was a little bit nervous about telling her, because I know, like, it wasn't even a possibility. I told y'all, like, growing up, it wasn't a thing. And so we went to New Orleans, and she went to queer burlesque with me, and she was like handing me the dollar bills. It was great, you know. So it's the processes and the time and the patience and also the grace that we give not just ourselves, but those who love us and surround us. But I know that's not always the case for everybody. Anything else? Yes. Oh yeah. The question was, do we have any recommendations for books, media, etc. I really love those. Oh, y'all should go watch it. The show Brown Girls. It's a web series. It's so good. It's free. Brown Girls, best web series. There's also Vida that just came out. Vida is I think on season 3 now. It's on Stars. That's really good. Books wise, Anzaldúa is always my go-to. I can share more after though, for sure. Yeah. You can follow me. So let's connect. You can follow me on my, you can email me or follow me, but also I have a blog that's called Queer, I don't post as much there, but it's Queer Feminista Blogger at blogspot.com, Queer Feminista Blogger at blogspot.com. It's about to die, okay. So yeah, please, and I do a lot of performances, like at Pride, at the Women's March, and for me, it's really an investment in, like, you know, in myself when I do my writing. So I would love to share with you. I also believe in queer aunties. So if you are looking for a queer auntie to like talk to, like, please hit me up. I love building familia. So yes. Any other last question? Thank you so much, everyone.